Hi, everybody. This is Carol. I am the Carol Cron. I'm the Senior Clinical Manager over the databases for the Society of Thoracic Surgeon. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Leanne and I are going to provide you some information related to new data managers. This is also helpful in your abstraction role as a refresher. If you just have a few questions, we'll be happy to answer those as well. Please use the Q&A function to submit your questions, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. On the line with us today, we have, I'll go through that in just one second. So we'll do the introductions and then introduction to the database and STS. We'll talk about educational resources, the data specs and software specs, how to read the data collection form. We'll talk about what cases get submitted, what variables are required for case inclusion into analysis. We'll talk about what analysis means, and we'll talk a little bit about risk adjustment. We'll give a quick overview of how to use the training manual and give you some information related to the updates that occur for the training manual. We'll talk about some keys to abstracting good, clean data, talk about building a relationship with your surgeons and your surgical team, and then how to submit a clinical question, ensure that your data is clean, and data submission deadlines and additional STS resources. So we're going to get started here. On the phone with us today are all of these wonderful people. Donna McDonald is the Director of Quality. You'll often hear her, she'll often be a support person on most of the other webinars that we have, answering questions related to the database. She's been around STS for, I believe, over 10 years and really knows this inside and out. So she's our fearless leader. And then we have Jane Hahn, who is the Associate Director, myself. Catherine Holyfield is over Intermax, and then Leanne Jones is over General Thoracic and Congenital. Derek Stack is our Contracts Manager. Emily Conrad is our Senior Coordinator. Emily manages AQO and the audits. And Addie Dolan is our Database Coordinator, and she'll help you with getting your people updated for your database and answer questions related to that area, as well as she has information for new data managers, and we'll get to that towards the end of the presentation. So first, just a quick introduction about STS, kind of to give you a purpose to what you're doing and why this is so important, and how data managers really have changed the care that the patients are receiving. And it's through high quality care that we're able to do things that we do at the STS to improve patient outcomes. The society was founded in 1964. The basis of the society was to allow all cardiac surgeons the ability to provide the highest quality care. Today we have more than 7,500 members in 99 countries, and we are managed, compared to other societies of our magnitude, we have a much smaller workforce of 65 employees in Chicago and DC. The first database was the adult cardiac, and it was started in 1989. The reason why this was started is, the reason why we started a database is because outcomes were coming out that showed that cardiac surgery had a very high mortality rate, and they were not risk adjusting. So our surgeon leaders wanted to develop a database that was able to risk adjust cases and to ultimately compare, if you will, apples to apples, so we could look across a continuum and see if we're actually doing good for the patient or if we're harming the patient. And what it came out to be is the outcomes that our cardiac surgeons were achieving was actually not anywhere near what CMS was looking like showing as towards causing harm to patients. So there was a misperception of the risk associated with surgery, which the databases helped clarify. Accomplishments from the database, and this goes along with the general thoracic, not just adult, but this is all of our databases, is we improve patient outcomes and patient safety, and patients are always coming first. This is why your job is so important as data managers, to make sure we get in good, clean data and we're able to do something with that data. The ultimate answer to that is we want to improve patient outcomes and patient safety. We do that by developing clinical practice guidelines like blood conservation and antibiotic usage. And then we also do voluntary public reporting, and it's known that sites who publicly report will historically have better outcomes than sites who do not publicly report. So that's kind of what the database does. And General Thoracic Database, it started in 2002, so it's almost 20 years old. We have 860 surgeons, 274 national and international sites, and we contain more than 600,000 records for more than 527,000 patients. So it's a significant database. There's a lot of great things that we hold in there. 6,000 records contains a lot of information. So what you're doing is very important in improving the care for all general thoracic patients across, not just within your state or within your hospital, but nationally and internationally. So I'm going to release a poll here. I have 2 questions for you. The first is, what is your background? And so I'm interested to know if you're a nurse, what area you work in. Data managers are typically, what we've seen and what I know is, you're smart, you're creative, you're meticulous, extremely organized, passionate in a good way. Most of you are nurses, some of you are health management specialists, or you hold other roles, but all of you are making a difference in our patients and in the care that we're able to provide. So it looks like, I'm going to end this poll and I'll share the results with you. It looks like the majority of people who are abstracting are nurses, with 71% of those on the call looking like you're nurses, and other roles are held here, you could see. Now I'm going to see if I can do the other poll. Well, this one is still going. Okay, I guess not. So then your current role, what is your current role? Do you abstract, are you only a data, not only, are you abstract data as your sole responsibility, other clinical or non-clinical duties? So, but looks like it's probably pretty split. Others have non-clinical duties, but it looks like, I'll share this here. I'm not sure if you can see all of them or not, but I'll leave that up for you. Hopefully you can see that. Okay. Now, as the data manager, your role, you abstract data, of course, you submit it, you clean it, you do quality improvement projects, you help lead those projects, or you may help provide the data to lead those that is being used in those projects to improve things that are happening on the floor. Maybe it's in the OR, maybe it's preoperatively. You help with charting. You are part of the best practices when you're developing best practices at your hospital. You improve the workflow on units by providing that data, and they use that to kind of streamline processes on your floor. You improve the teamwork. You work with your surgeons and other quality administrators at your hospital regarding during these quality assurance meetings, and you support departments. You also talk to your administration about your star ratings. Getting into the database, we're going to talk a little bit. So we're going to talk a little bit about the functionality of the database, how it works, timeframes for different things. The General Thoracic Database is upgraded every 3 years, or updated every 3 years. That means we go through a data specification upgrade. We review all of the elements that are being collected. We look at the frequency that they're being collected. We look at the accuracy of the data that's coming in, the relevance of it. We look at any new trends that are happening in general thoracic surgery, and the surgeon leaders of the STS. We have a task force. It's called the General Surgery Database Task Force. They review every element and then they make suggestions on changes. This year we started the upgrade process for 2021. And we will have a new version coming out in January. We did some streamlining for the data collection. We talked about how we collect that data to try to ease data collection burden without losing the granularity of the database. In that process, we developed data specifications and software specifications. The data specifications give us information This is the picture up on the top of the screen. This is a screenshot of what the data specifications look like. It gives us a definition. We have a long name, which is, it's the name of the field that it's written out, so it's really easy to help recognize what's being collected in this field. We have a short name, which is, this short name will stay with, it can never be changed. The definition has to be tied to the short name, and it's something that goes across versions. And then we have which section it is, which database table it's in. The definition is a very, usually a rather generic type of definition. And this is what the vendors will include in their software build. So the vendors will use both of these tools, the data specifications and the software specifications, to build their software. And they use this definition. So if your vendor software has a hover function, this is what will pop up. And this is fine that it pops up, it's great. When we get to the training manual, we'll get a little bit more in depth about why it's important to read the training manual even though you have the definition available. The screen below here, this is a shot of the software specifications. This tells the vendor how the field, the main points that need to be included in the field and what the field values mean. So a core field, which is listed up here, it just contains a value, a yes or no, to define whether or not the field should be available to the user for data entry. So in the current version, all of these will be yes. And this is just 2 documents that are available. The data specifications provide you with information about the field type, the allowable values within that field, if there's a parent-child relationship, and the specifications for software provide the vendor with how that software should be built for themselves. We'll get a little bit more into this. Hold on one second. So when we're talking about allowable values and parent codes, when you open up the, I'm going to show you here. When you open up the data specifications, you're going to see, again, the long name, short name, section name, tables, the definition. You'll still see things like low, high, or usual, high, usual, low values, the parent name, hemoglobin, yes, what the parent value was in order to get to this field. And then you're going to say, okay, well, I have these values and this is what the ranges that are allowed. And if I'm outside of that value, what do I do? And typically you're not, but we would help you with further understand that. But first I want to show you something and where to find all of this, because you're probably wondering what the heck I'm talking about. So this is the sts.org website. Under registries and STS National Database, under General Thoracic here, and access data collection resources. Under the current version, which is 2.41, you would have your training manual, your data collection forms, non-analyzed data collection forms, and then your additional resources. So this is the data specifications. And when we pull it up, this is how it's laid out. And you can see, we'll go here to a field that is, that you collect. We'll look at patient ID. And then I'll show you over here on the data collection form. So we have patient ID here, it's just this, and it says PATID 80. So this in the red here, this is the annotated data collection form, which means that you would have, annotated means that you have the short name and sequence number available. In the non-annotated form, these would all be removed. It just saves room and people sometimes don't like to print it with all of the annotation on it. So if I want to know more about what's in this field or what the requirements are to enter this field, I'm going to look in the data specifications under PATID or sequence number 80. So here this is. Here's the short name, PATID, sequence number 80. I can see the definition here. I can see that the format is text, which means that it's going to be letters or numbers. It could be a combination of that. And I can see that the data source is automatic. which means that this is going to be automatically pulled over from another source. Now, if I want it to get down to, we'll look at, let's just say name, patient's first name. So I'm here, patient's first name, PATF, NAM, sequence number 100. Well, my hospital might not want to provide all that information because that's really PHI. So we get a lot of questions that say, do I need to provide the patient's name, or do I need to provide the patient's date of birth or postal code? Again, because these are all PHI and some hospitals don't want to include that information. So first I'm going to go check the data specs to see if I need to provide that. I find here PATF name, sequence number 100. Okay, this is the right field. Let's see what it says. Core, yes. So that means that the vendor software has to make it available for me to enter into the vendor software. But harvest is optional. So how do I know what harvest optional means? I would go over here to the software specifications. We can just do a quick find. See what we come up with harvest. Probably not the best one, but here it is. These are all going to provide you with the definition. And it says the harvest, this field contains a value of yes or no or optional to define whether or not the data for this field is included in the export file to be submitted to the data warehouse. So the data warehouse for us now is IQVIA. These files will be uploaded to IQVIA, which is your export file. What I was reading in this data spec for patient's first name, it said the harvest was optional. So what does that mean? It means that the individual user, which is me as the abstractor, can determine whether or not data from this field is included in the data file. So within your vendor software, there should be an option for you to exclude optional fields, and this would be one of them. So the answer to the question is, do I need to submit patient's first name? No, it's optional. You do not need to do that. Any of the PHI fields are marked as optional. So that's a high-level rundown of how to read the data specs and how to read the data collection form and software specs. I know it's a lot of information. These webinars will be recorded, and then so you'll be able to review this again. And then we get into the allowable values. This is a hemoglobin field. Within the data specifications, it talks about low value, high value, usual range low, usual range high. The usual ranges are those ranges that you'll see them on usually you'll see these ranges listed on the lab reports coming back. These are ranges that within this value will be considered normal hemoglobin level. So usually between 8 and 16 will be considered normal. So that's this green range here. And this diagram is just for just a visual to help understand better. So this is a usual range low, usual range high. If my hemoglobin going into surgery is 6.0, that's going to flag in your vendor software, that's going to flag a message that says that you're out of the usual range. So not too much to do about that. Usually most patients having surgery may be out of usual ranges, not a big alarm. Just double check it to make sure you didn't accidentally type something in incorrectly, or that maybe, finger slip or something like that. Now, let's say that the hemoglobin comes back, and this is before the patient goes into surgery. It's the last one closest to OR entry. And it says that my hemoglobin is 2.5, and I enter in 2.5. We can see that 2.5 is below this low value. This low value is the lowest allowable value allowed into the database. If you go below this value, you're going to get a critical warning that says that value is not allowed. What happens there then is you're going to need to enter the lowest allowable value, which is 3.0. This is important because this is the only place where you would ever enter anything that is not exactly as it is for on the patient's outcome results or on their lab results, is when it's outside of this low value or high value. The reason why this is allowed is because when we build risk models, we have to have some type of, I guess you want to call it bookmarks, because when we get outside of this range, it is so I guess variable, or there's a lot of noise outside when we get to much lower values or much higher values, that it actually doesn't tell the true story of the risk of the patient. So the low value for 3.0, it's the lowest that we can go. That's the lowest value that you can enter. If you have a value that's below 3.0, you need to enter the 3.0. Same thing with the high value. If you have a value that's above 50, which these values are so far out of the normal range, it's really highly unlikely that you would ever have anything that's below 3 or above 50. But if for whatever reason you did, then you would enter 50 as your highest value. So that's the allowable values. And we're going to talk more about the data collection form here. So I'm going to pull over, I'm going to pull my screen back over here. And this is, so here we are. We went to the sts.org, Registries and Research, the STS National Database, General Thoracic Surgery Database, and then we come here to the data collection, data abstraction resources for 2.41. We have a couple different data collection forms available. Why do we have 5 different forms? That's a great question. The first we look here, it says data collection form, DCF, which is the term we use. You'll see that acronym quite a bit. And then the analyzed procedures and non-analyzed procedures. Analyzed procedures may or may not have a risk model associated with them, but they will all be reported out in some format within your reports. So then we may do some type of calculation on them. They may or may not be risk adjusted, but that's what that is. Non-analyzed procedures are procedures that you want to collect at your site, but there's no risk model associated with them, and we will not provide feedback to you on them. Risk model procedures are those, we'll get into that in a little bit. This is kind of a little confusing part of how to explain it clearly. We have risk models for confirmed lung cancer and confirmed esophageal cancer cases. So those are what we have risk models on. We analyze other procedures like hiatal hernia, thymectomies, things like that. We'll get into that in a little bit as well. But that's what an analyzed procedure is. And the risk model procedure means that we have risk models that will look at the risk of the patient going into surgery and then adjust that to provide you with an observed to expected. So we were able to come up with an expected for your type of patient entering the operating room, how we would expect them to do based off of a whole bunch of other cases, based off of cases out of that 600,000 total cases that we talked about earlier, looking at how your patient did compared to a whole other big cohort of patients. And the expected is that whole other big cohort of patients, and the observed is your patient. So that's how risk models work, and it helps determine if you're performing as expected, which would be an O/E ratio of 1. Your observed to expected is equal, so that would be 1. We will talk more, I believe, about risk modeling at the Advances in Outcome and Quality Outcomes meeting, and we'll talk about that later in 1 second too. So these are the different forms we have available. Annotated means that it has that red marking on it, which will show you the sequence number and short name. Non-annotated means that all of that red language, all of the short names and sequence numbers are removed. It makes it just easier for printing, saves on paper, and some folks don't need to have all of the short names and sequence numbers on there. but those are your data collection forms. And we talked about analyzed procedures. So at the top of the data collection form, you'll see some information. We're going to talk about this in more detail as well. It says an analyzed procedure data collection is required for all diagnosed lung and esophageal cancer resections, and one should be initiated every time the patient enters the operating room. So for the same stay, if your patient goes into the operating room 3 times and has a procedure for lung cancer 3 times, you would enter 3 different data collection forms. On the form, there's underlined in blue. We'll talk about what that means. And then the completion of the thymus, mediastinal mass, tracheal resection, and hiatal hernia GERD sections are optional for analyzed procedures, but you're still welcome to capture data on that if your site chooses to do so. Oops. So we have analyzed procedures. Required is the confirmed lung cancer and confirmed esophageal cancer resections. These are risk adjusted, meaning we have risk models for them. You can see the risk of the patient going into the operating room by collecting this data, and you can see how well you're performing when compared to other like cases. And then we have the not all analyzed cases are risk adjusted. These will be like your hiatal hernia, thymectomy, mediastinal masses. These are not required to be entered in, they're optional, but if you choose to enter them in, we will provide you information back on your biannual reports. Non-analyzed procedures, these are not required. These are things like other lung or esophagus cases that are not related to a primary lung or esophageal tumor. And then we have the optional procedures for the other categories that we listed before. Concomitant procedures are things that are done in conjunction with another procedure. So we may have an analyzed lung cancer procedure. A primary tumor is lung cancer. You may do a segmentectomy, and then they may do a bronchoscopy. And I'm going to show you a screenshot in a second what that would look like. That case needs to get in. The lung cancer segmentectomy is an analyzed procedure. The bronchoscopy is not an analyzed procedure. It's a concomitant procedure that all goes on the one data collection form if it was done in the same operation. And the lung procedure would get analyzed. The lung procedure with primary cancer would get analyzed. So here's this case that I was talking about. We did a removal of a lung. We did a single segment, a segmentectomy. This is your analyzed procedure. On your data collection form, what that looks like, we'll scroll through it real fast here. This is the annotated form. It has the red language on here. We get down into the operation section. This is diagnosis. We get down into the operation section. We have analyzed procedures here. Just below that, we have non-analyzed procedures here. I'm going to select my analyzed procedure, whatever that case was, and then I had maybe they did a bronch with that procedure selected here, and that all gets sent in on the one data collection form for the same trip to the OR. What does that look like in the operative section? So on the same form, we had, this is still in the operative section, and this is where you're going to choose what surgical procedure was performed that we want further information on. So you've gotten this far, you told us what you did, and then the next question is, was a surgical procedure performed for lung cancer? And remove this word suspected. We only want procedures that were performed for actual primary lung cancer to be completed to complete section F. So you'll see on here, I blacked out the suspected. So you would answer yes here for that question. And then what happens is section F will open, and that's the lung cancer section. And you would provide us with all of the preoperative information, intraoperative, the nodal information, and then the pathological staging for those primary lung cancer cases. So primary analyzed procedure, concomitant procedure, and this primary procedure was done if confirmed for a primary lung cancer. That's how you would select yes to this lung cancer 1580. The next section we're going to talk about if no analyzed procedure is performed, but your site chooses to enter all they want to enter all cases in, which would include the non-analyzed procedures. Some sites would do this just for tracking of cases. What you would do here is you would leave this analyzed procedure section blank. You would get down to the non-analyzed procedure. You can select what you did, which would be the bronchoscopy. But when we get down to this question that says surgical procedure for lung cancer, you're going to check no. And then you would not fill in the section for F. So if no analyzed procedure with positive primary lung cancer is performed, then you answer no to lung cancer at sequence 1580. Okay, so let's go over that one more time. You must have a positive primary cancer finding and an analyzed procedure performed to answer yes to either lung cancer at sequence 1580 or esophageal cancer at 1590. For lung cancer, primary means, when you're talking about a primary tumor, it means that it is not a metastatic cancer in the lung for lung cancer. So what does that mean? So for an example, if the patient had a colon cancer with mets to the lung, that is not a primary lung cancer. That's a primary colon cancer. The cancer metastasized to the lung. It is not a primary lung tumor. If the patient has a primary lung cancer with mets to other organs, that case would be, you would code yes to that case. But the reverse, again, primary colon cancer or primary other organ outside of the lung with mets to the lung, that's not a primary lung cancer case. The same holds true for esophageal cancer. Primary means that it is not a metastatic cancer in the esophagus. So an example is the patient has a primary stomach cancer and the patient has mets to the esophagus. That case you would code no to primary esophageal cancer. However, if the patient had a primary esophageal tumor and it had mets to another organ, that is the primary. So you would need to ensure that you knew if this was a primary cancer or if this was a metastasis in order to code yes to fill out these sections for lung cancer and esophageal cancer. Okay, so we're going to get down to the required variables for case inclusion. This is at the top of the data collection form. You'll see there's instructions here about what goes in, what doesn't go in. And right here it says fields that appear in underlined and in blue are required for analyzed procedure for record inclusion. If any of these fields are missing data, the entire record will be excluded from analysis. It's really important to make sure that you have all of these blue fields filled out for the analyzed procedures to be included in analysis. So there are things like this, and throughout the form you'll see they're extremely important for us to have for the risk assessment on the patient and for the risk adjustment of the case. So you'll see that throughout the form you'll see some of these in blue, and they're extremely important for you to get. Otherwise your case will not be analyzed. And this is for analyzed procedures to be included. Some of those optional analyzed procedures, which were like the hiatal hernia section, if you choose to enter those cases in, you still have to complete the blue fields. So make sure you do that. And then talk about the training manual. So there's the 3 documents that are important here. We have the training manual. This is updated monthly, and then we have our data collection forms, our data specifications and software specifications. The change summary document is what changed from one version to the next. For those data managers that have been between versions, between the upgrade on the versions, this comes in to be helpful when you just want a quick look at what was removed or what was added between versions. So for this section, we're going to talk more about the training manual. The training manual is your abstractor guide. It's going to tell you everything you need to know, hopefully, mostly everything you need to know to abstract a case successfully for each field. It is updated on a monthly basis. As we get in questions from data managers, we discuss those questions with the surgeons, and we may need to provide some clarity for that definition or for that intent clarification. And if we do that, then we will put an update in, and the updates go out on a monthly basis. So here you'll see it looks very similar at the top to what we had in the data specifications. We have the sequence number, the long name, the short name, the definition, which is just a rather generic definition, right? For this, it says indicate if the patient has, and it's just a rather generic. And then what's special about the training manual is that it includes this section, this intent clarification section, and it's also going to include things down here that are dated. The intent clarification section is where we're going to provide you more granular information on the definition. What do we really mean within that definition, and how can we make it more clear or clearer for when you're abstracting the data so you know exactly what we're looking for. And sometimes we think we're being clear, but we're not, and that's when we get these questions, and so we have to provide these FAQs down here at the bottom to help. So the intent clarification, it can change over time. It can change throughout, monthly. Something can be added to it monthly, or we can make changes to it. But we'll always note our change. We just won't go in and delete stuff and not provide you with a running log of what we did here. So for instance, this is the valvular heart disease. It says we removed this for whatever reason. We had questions and maybe it wasn't making sense. And then in May 2019, it said valvular heart disease is not limited to just insufficiency or stenosis. If the patient has a valvular heart disease that is documented as moderate or greater, this field should be captured. We try to date, our goal is to date these entries, and the dated entries apply to cases that occur starting, so for this clarification, this will apply to cases that had an OR date of January 2019 and future. So we won't make you go back. We won't put in an update in the training manual and say, for any update we go in, you have to go back and correct all of your data. We would not do that. We're going to ask you to start from this point forward to start collecting this way. So it's important that when these training manuals come out that you go and review them as you're abstracting to make sure that if we put any changes in that you may need to know about. And to do that easily, when you click on the training manual link, it'll come up like this. But if you kind of move your mouse around, I'm in Chrome right now. If you move up your mouse around, you'll see the bookmark tab. And Leanne has bookmarked where the changes are at. So you can easily navigate to those changes. I think this is the most recent one. Yeah, there we go. So July 2020. So that's the training manual. We do, when the new version comes out, so the new version will be version 5.21. 5 indicates that it's a general thoracic upgrade, and 0.21 indicates the year that the upgrade goes live. The training manual will incorporate some of the FAQs from the previous version to clarify, to provide some clarity within the intent clarification section, and then it'll be a clean slate, and we'll go from there. Again, updates happen every month, so it's important to check those out. And then, let's see here, oops. Couple keys to abstraction. Just be consistent in where you're obtaining your data from. Use the same source documents. However, you want to pay attention to your source documentation and make sure it aligns with what's in the training manual and what suggestions are in the training manual. And you also want to make sure that the time frame and the mode of testing are meeting the requirements that are listed in the training manual. If you can't find it in your documentation in the EHR, ask your surgeon. It's really important to start that surgeon relationship and surgical staff relationship So you're comfortable asking questions. This is their data and it's used for outcomes, which reflects upon the hospital and the surgeon. So they may not know everything that goes into the database, and it's kind of your job to explain how the database works, the benefits of the database, and why you're asking the questions, and this is where the star ratings come from. Once they know that it reflects their outcomes, they're probably going to be more apt to help you get what you need. And don't guess. No data is better than bad data. So if you can't find it, ask, and please don't guess. It's okay if we prefer fields not to be blank, especially the blue underlined ones. But if you can't find it, or you don't have the information, or your surgeon, for whatever reason, the information doesn't exist, then it's okay to leave a field blank instead of guessing at an answer, or feeling like you need to fill in all the blanks. It's okay to do that. And then working with your surgeons, most people are nurses, so they probably have a good relationship or have worked with surgeons before, but as we all know, surgeons are busy. So you have to be patient, but it's really important to be persistent if you want your questions answered. Sometimes there's a back way to get around to them. You may want to reach out to their staff, to their office staff, or maybe they have a PA or an MP that works with them that may be more likely to get you the answer that you need. But use your resources and make sure you are working with the surgical team to get your answers met. Again, the outcomes are not just your job. It's the surgeon's job to help you make sure the outcomes are, that what you're putting in are correct, so the outcomes are accurate. When you're asking questions, be sure to be clear and concise. Know what you're going to ask before you ask it, and do your homework and know the facts before you ask a question. Have everything available to you and then ask, and you're more likely to get an answer quicker, and instead of going back and forth with emails or however you communicate. You're going to get involved with quality meetings and department meetings where this data is being discussed. So you want to really understand what you're collecting and what the outcomes mean. What story are the outcomes telling? So you want to understand that, and kind of going to have to dive into it. And with the IQVIA dashboard, when we have the benchmark dashboard available, it's going to be important to understand what you're looking at. So we'll help you with that with upcoming webinars, so you can present it at your quality meetings and department meetings. You may want to ask to observe a case so you have a better idea of what you're abstracting. I know I'm a visual learner, and I think most people in this type of profession are visual learners. So we do better when we see something, and then we can put that to the words that we're abstracting on a data collection form. So you could ask to observe a case if you haven't already seen that. Review your data with the surgeon so he knows or she knows what you're collecting. And then you can also offer tips on how documentation can be improved by building your EHR templates. Epic does have those fillable forms, or you can make surgeon worksheets and ask your surgeon to fill those out for each case. For version 5.21, we will be making surgeon worksheets that we'll post online to help you get some of that information, like the nodal stations or the ECOG scores. And then you're going to want to work with your nursing and OR staff, because they're going to be able to help you as well with the information you're abstracting. And now I'm going to hand it over to Leanne, and she's going to talk about submitting questions. So Leanne, it's all you.
Great. Thank you, Carol. That was awesome. So next we're going to move into submitting a clinical question. If you have questions about submitting a case that's clinical in nature, we ask you to submit that to us via the FAQ mailbox. I don't know, Carol, I don't know if you mind if you could pull up the STS website, and I'll just show where this is located really quick. If you go from the STS database homepage, and let's see here, thank you, and click on registries, and then click on the STS National Database homepage. If you scroll down and if you scroll and look right under the link there for live webinars, you'll see the clinical question request form. And you just click that button, ask a question, and the form will pop up, and then you can fill out all the information that we need here. As you can see, in most cases you'll receive an answer within 30 days, but again, here's just a quick glance at the form, it's important that you do select the database and the data version in which you're asking your question on. Right now, we are working in General Thoracic version 2.41. So any questions related to entering data on the current form, be sure to answer your question, select General Thoracic 241. In January, when we switch over to 5.21, there'll be an option here for General Thoracic 5.21. I'm sorry, 4.21. There'll be for the next version. So just be sure when you're asking your question to make sure you're selecting the database, database version that corresponds to the question and form that you're working in. When you are submitting this form, some very important items that you'll need your participant ID number. And the participant ID number is a 5-digit number starting with a 4. It's a 40,000 series, and that number is assigned to you by the STS when you initiate your contract. So if you are unsure of your participant ID number, you can feel free to contact me directly, but it is very helpful to have your participant ID number when you submit that question. Also needed are the short name and sequence number, and of course these can be found on the annotated DCF form that Carol pointed out earlier. Those are the short name and sequence number there in red on the annotated form. And this lets us know which variable you are asking your question about. Also, please be sure to include as much information as you can to help us answer your question. We can only answer, your questions based on the information you provide. We don't like to assume things. It is not unusual for us to have to follow up and ask for more information. So sometimes we do need to follow up and ask for maybe the path report if we can see that. So just know that we may follow up and ask for additional information if we're unable to answer your question based off the information that you provide. And also, again, just please note it can take up to 30 days for a response. We do have monthly core group calls where all of these questions are gathered. I'll gather all the questions that are submitted. I'll present them to our core group. Our core group is made up of the seasoned data managers, as well as we have surgeon leaders. So all of these questions are submitted to our core group and surgeon leaders for review and for response. So again, these calls are handled, are scheduled for once a month, and sometimes we do thoracic twice a month, just depending upon the volume of questions that we receive. So again, just know that we do ask for a 30-day response, and I will get back to you sooner if I can, but of course, some situations do require a 30-day response time. Okay, next slide. All right. So for clean data, it's very important for you to run internal quality control checks prior to submitting your data file for harvest. A lot of your vendor software already has these internal Q&A checks included in your software. If you do not have any of the internal quality checks, I highly recommend that you do contact your vendor and work with them directly. I know the risk models are very important for a lot of you. I suggest, getting a report based on your risk model variables. You would definitely want to make sure that data is cleaned up prior to submission. In addition to your internal data quality checks, once you do submit your data file to IQVIA, IQVIA will provide you with a data quality report for your submission. You'll also have a harvest summary report, as well as a critical summary report. So each data submission that each data file that you submit, you will get a specific data quality report for that particular data file submission. If you want to look at your all of your data to clean up in the reporting period, in the entire reporting period, instead of looking at each individual data quality report, you can use the harvest summary report effort. We have covered how to use the data quality report, harvest summary reports, the critical error report on our monthly webinars, as well as our user group calls. So those are also recorded out on the STS website as well. And also coming up, which will be a nice new feature for our next upgrade for the general thoracic, we will have on-save consistency checks built into the vendor software that will prevent you from saving your data if certain errors are present. So that will be coming with the next upgrade, these on-save consistency checks. All right, next slide. For our data submission deadlines, our next general thoracic harvest deadline is set for Friday, September the 18th. I'm sure you all are aware of this, our current fall 2020 harvest. Our harvest submission deadlines occur twice a year for the general thoracic database. We have a spring harvest as well as a fall harvest. Following those harvests, both the spring and the fall harvest reports do include a star rating. That's a little bit different from adult cardiac. I know adult cardiac has 4 harvests a year. Unlike thoracic, we do it twice a year. Adult cardiac has adult star ratings on the first and third harvest, but we do them for both our spring and fall harvest for general thoracic. Our voluntary public reporting results are based on the spring harvest, so we only do the public reporting for the spring, and it's based on the spring harvest results, and our lung cases and our esophageal cancer cases are the cases that are used in public reporting. All right, our next slide, please. All right, for additional resources, our data management, we do provide several different types of resources for our data managers. We do have our monthly didactic webinars. I'm sure that you all have been attending. We also have our monthly user group calls for our data managers. Again, today we just started our new quarterly new data manager webinar series. So we will have another one coming soon. I don't think we've determined the date for that yet, but more information will be posted about our next new data manager webinar. Also, a great resource is our Advances in Quality and Outcomes, a data managers meeting. If you have not been able to attend an AQO meeting, we highly recommend our data managers to attend these meetings. These meetings are geared for our data managers. This year, things will be a little bit different. We will have a virtual AQO, but I hope you all do attend. It's one of the best resources for our data managers. It also allows you to network with other data managers across the country. So again, we highly encourage you all to attend our AQO meetings. This year at AQO, we'll be reviewing the 5.21 upgrade. Again, it'll be virtual. We'll have both live and pre-recorded content, and there will be CEUs available as well for our virtual AQO. For our new data managers, if you are fairly new, and if you would like a list of resources, please contact Addie Dolan at the STS for a welcome packet. Addie will send you an email that includes a list of all of the information, quick links to documents that we've covered here throughout this webinar. So please contact Addie Dolan at 8dolan@sts.org, and she'll be happy to send you that email that includes that little new data manager welcome packet. All right, next slide. If you've been attending our monthly webinars and our user group calls, you may have already heard about the AQO data managers meeting that we just discussed. Emily Conrad has been providing us updates as we progress through planning our very first virtual AQO. So just to recap rather quickly, the general thoracic session is going to be held on Wednesday, September the 30th. We will cover topics such as the version 5.21 upgrade. There'll be a discussion on grading complications, how to code and abstract tracheal resections, lung and esophageal cancer cases. We'll cover staging, diagnoses, procedure coding, etc. We'll also have a discussion on counting nodes. And again, those are just a few of the topics and objectives that will be covered for our very first virtual thoracic AQO session. All right, our next slide. So I know we are running a little bit short on time, but we do have some questions. Right now, we're going to turn things over to you all for open discussion for any questions. And also, I do notice that in the chat box, Carol and Emily have been including some links for additional information on AQO and some additional information down in the chat box. So please be sure to check out the chat box and for the information, the links that Carol and Emily have provided. But again, we're going to turn things over to you all for open discussion. We'll answer as many questions as possible. We encourage your feedback, and we'd love to hear from you. Again, just please be sure to submit your question via the Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks, Leanne.
So oh, no problem.
Go ahead. Keep reading, and I'll run the stuff over here.
Okay, I'm just going to go through our slides. This is where are the recording of these webinars available? Could you please provide the link?
Yep.
So the recordings are available here. Go ahead, Carol.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Carol.
I'll put the link in the box. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so the recordings are available here on the STS National Database homepage. So again, on the homepage, if you just scroll down to the live webinars and click on that link, that'll bring you to our webinar page. And here we have the links to all the webinars, adult, congenital, and thoracic. All of our past webinars, just click on the link down there at the bottom, and you'll have the recordings from our calls as well as the slide deck presentations. And also there is a link to our YouTube playlist where all of our webinars are housed out on YouTube as well. All right, thank you, Carol. Our next question, I think that this is when we were talking about the high and low limits. Does this also go for how many lymph nodes when we were talking about the ranges? And let me pull up my training manual real quick. And let's see here. So Carol, for sequence number, for total number of nodes harvested, there are usual ranges, high and low values for number of nodes harvested. If you scroll down.
So it's 1990.
Yes. So
yeah. So to find this information out, what you want to look at is you're going to look at the lung CA nodes 1990 in the data specifications. So I'm going to go up here to my find button, and I'm going to search for sequence number 1990 and see what comes up here. And so we have a couple values here. We have a low value of 0 and a high value of 80. So these are really low value of 0. You can't get any lower than that. And high value of 80, highly unlikely you're going to go over 80 on that one. So we have a usual range and a usual low and a usual high, which is probably pretty acceptable for your cases. So that's how you would find that information.
Perfect. Thank you, Carol. All right, our next question. Do we need to use the form if we are entering data electronically?
No.
I know that, yeah, no, you don't have to. I know some people choose, I think it's, dependent upon the person, the data manager. I know a lot of data managers are electronically only. Some collect on paper and then enter into the software. It depends on, I think, you as a person and as a data manager, what you prefer to do.
Yeah, and we just ask that if you're going to enter your cases on paper, that you save them for however long you need to, either related to the time frame that's included in the outcomes report. So I think how many years goes in the outcomes reports for the star ratings, Leanne?
Right.
And then, okay, and then however long, and then also consider if you ever get audited, if you do take notes on those papers that might help you with your audit, you would want to save those as well for however long.
Correct.
Okay.
All right.
Do you want to keep, we can
So
keep, do you have time to keep going and we can answer, there's 5 questions, we can get through these for everybody who's like to stay? Okay.
That's fine. Our next question, so if the patient's primary lung or esophageal cancer recurs and reoperate, are those analyzable cases?
Yeah, I want to say, I know we weren't going to answer clinical questions on this,
Oh, yeah.
this one, but I believe that If it's a primary tumor in the lung or esophagus, then those cases would get would be collected.
All right, our next question. Yes, thank you, Donna and Carol. Our next question, what is the date range of cases to be included in the September deadline? For example, January through July cases of 2020. So if we pull up the SPS website and look at the harvest schedule information, this information is included out here. We just so you can have a point of reference and just scroll down to the harvest schedule and information. There we go. And general thoracic surgery database. So here for the spring, our deadline is 9/18 and includes procedures performed through this date. So for the fall, our reporting period will include procedures from 7/1/2017 up through 6/30/2020. So this is where you can find what are the procedures that will be included and reported on for that specific harvest. All right. And Mindy says, this is great. I wish you had this last year when I started. Thank you, Mindy. We are happy that this is helpful, and we are glad that you all are finding it very helpful. Let's see, is it possible to get a mentor congenital if possible? Hi, Liz. Yes, the STS does have a mentorship program available. So Carol is showing up on the screen right here. You go to the STS National Database homepage, and you click on the link for Data Manager Education. And that will bring up our Data Manager Education page, and you see there is a link for the Data Manager Mentorship Program. You click there, and then you can apply to be either a mentor or a mentee, and just select whichever one you are applying for, and then it'll walk you through a form. And then you can request whichever our database that you are specifically interested in. If you have any questions about the program, please email Addie Dolan, our National Database Coordinator, and Addie can get you more information on the program. And again, she can be reached at adolan@sts.org. All right. Our next question, can you clarify the harvest deadlines related to dates of surgical procedures reviewed for each harvest? Also, if you onboard with a program, are you required to review cases back to the beginning of the year? Okay, so for example, let's say you're a new participant, you just started, just came on. The reporting period is going to cover July 1, 2017 through 6/30/2020. If you are brand new, you can submit what data you have up through 6/30/2020. You can submit data as far back as IQVIA through 2 data versions, but you're not required to go back to the whole year, but you can submit what data up through 6/30/2020. I don't know if Donna or Carol, if you have anything to.
Yeah, you could, thanks, that's right, Leanne. You can start with your date that you're starting to participate in the database and go forward. Some sites have opted to include past cases just to have them in the database. So whatever works best for you, but once you start with the database, you at least have to go forward with your cases for them to be included in the database, but you're welcome to go back as well if you choose to.
And you can enter cases, this is Donna, beyond June 30th of 2020. It's just the analysis window was there.
Oh yeah.
Right.
That's
the beauty of the continuous harvest now with IQVIA. You know, you can submit cases up through, today if you're doing so. So that's the beauty of the continuous harvest with IQVIA. You don't have to be stuck just to that 6/30/2020. So you can submit data, every month, quarterly, daily, however you prefer.
That's right.
All right, we have one last question from Mindy. Can we do one of these to explain the harvest report? So yes, we can look at once IQVIA, we get the data back from IQVIA and it's moved into the dashboard and we have the risk adjusted data out on the dashboard. We will be having educational webinars on how to work through that and how to understand it and how to use that. So that will be coming once the data is back from analysis and is uploaded within the IQVIA dashboard. So we will have more educational webinars on how to use the dashboard for reporting.
And I'm just going to add to that, Leanne. We've since November of last year, we've been doing monthly webinars with IQVIA on, and now we're doing bi-monthly webinars with IQVIA on the different features within their platform. So if you haven't had a chance yet to go to watch any of these webinars, or you've only caught in a couple, you may want to go back and quickly review the PDF slides and see if it's something that you need help with learning. And then if it is, watch the user group call for more information, or watch the webinar for more information. What's listed here on the website only goes back until just earlier this year. We clean it up. We have to remove some of these because it's getting kind of long. But prior to March 11th, you'll find all of them on the webinar, the YouTube page here for general thoracic. So you may want to check that out if you haven't had a chance to do that, in all your free time, which none of us have.
If you're having trouble sleeping and you need, you're up late at night, you need something to go check out our webinar page. So,
Okay.
Well, I don't have any other questions. I know we're over time. Again, this webinar will be recorded and the slide deck will be posted out on the website. Thank you all for joining our very first new General Thoracic Database New Data Manager webinar. If you all have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. My email is ljones@sts.org. Again, I am the General Thoracic Database Manager. So please feel free to reach out to me directly and I can get your questions answered. My email is there, and also my phone is 312-202-5822. So please reach out. I'm happy to help. I just wanted to thank everybody on the team for joining me today. Thank you, Carol, for the first half of the presentation. It was awesome. You're an amazing teacher, so thank you for that. And I hope everyone has a great week.
Thanks, Leanne. Great job. You did awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everybody,
Thanks, everyone.
for joining. Bye.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you.